Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, Alaska's pipeline to the future, delivering oil today, sustaining operations for tomorrow, committed to safety, operating the 800-mile Trans-Alaska Pipeline since 1977.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 1st of April. I will be your fool for the evening here as we talk about the weather. Weather.gov/Alaska is your one-stop shop for weather information around all of Alaska, or go to weather.gov and click on Alaska for even finer details there into your local weather forecast. Give us a call at the Weather Info line, of course, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube 24 hours a day and in between the Alaska Weather Show. We want to, if you haven't heard yet, there has been a real earthquake, and this is, I'm not fooling here, this is not a drill or an April Fool's joke. There's an 8.2 earthquake off the coast of Chile, around 6.2 kilometers in depth. And currently, the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska is analyzing this, but there are no watches or advisories for any part of Alaska at this point. There have been some tsunami, I believe, reported along the coast of Chile, but that's what we know right now. And for information, anytime there is a major earthquake like this, you should always be prepared to move to higher ground when that alert is given. And right now there is no watch and no advisory for any part of Alaska, but if there is, you'll find out from your NOAA weather radio online at weather.gov or weather.gov/Alaska. So probably not a bad idea just to make sure the batteries are working in your weather radio, as always is the case. But at this point, there is no information for Alaska for a watch or an advisory. So stay tuned, and you can always go to tsunami.gov for the very latest information there about any tsunami alerts in Alaska. With that said, there is a lot of very calm weather going on around most of Alaska on this beautiful day across the mainland. One thing to point out, though, about that earthquake, that is probably the largest earthquake since the one last May over in the Sea of Okhotsk. It was over here, just south and west of the Kamchatka Peninsula. That, too, was an 8.2 magnitude earthquake, so a pretty sizable quake there off the coast of Chile. So again, if you haven't heard that news yet, information there probably on the news wires in your favorite news program. Here's a look at the satellite picture across the Bering, and our active weather continues to show several areas of low pressure working in further and further into that stable area across the mainland of Alaska under the control of high pressure. You can see the latest zone of low pressure here well south of the Kamchatka Peninsula, working its boundary farther north. Here's another one that's been dying out very slowly today. But mostly we're looking at the core of that active weather staying south of Alaska. A look at mainland Alaska with the infrared satellite picture shows some waves of clouds working their way over southeast. High pressure warming things up across the mainland, trying to chip away at the snowpack. One of those waves of low pressure working its way up into the Bristol Bay region. This frontal boundary dying out, but man, is it wrapped in on itself. It is just spiraling itself in right across south and west Alaska and the eastern part of the chain. High pressure is weakening somewhat across the Arctic coast. It looks like perhaps by mid to late week we may have a minor interruption in this pattern before perhaps going back toward more controlling high pressure once again. So as you look at the weather map, it looks like this wave here moving across the Gulf could spin into an area of low pressure that would bring a little bit more rainfall and cloud potential to southern parts of southeast, especially maybe the center sections of the archipelago. But out to the west, the main storm track will be the key feature across the Aleutians, with periods of rain and snow showers from time to time. Most of that staying away from Kodiak and perhaps until late tomorrow and into Thursday. In the meantime, fair and dry weather for Fairbanks and eastern Norton Sound, as well as Nome and parts of the Arctic coast. And things still looking fairly dry for South Central as well. Here's a look at the weather map. There's the dying front there as it moves across the Alaska Peninsula at 989 millibars. The second front behind that, a little bit stronger low attached to it at 986 millibars. Small craft advisories out for many sections of the Bering and the Aleutians at this hour. Mainly dry conditions there across southeast. High pressure across the Arctic coast allowed a brief snow shower to be reported at Barrow today. Tonight, most of that will fall apart. Periods of clouds across the Copper River Basin. Southwestern Alaska might pick up a snow shower or two. Periods of rain and snow possible to fall pretty light around Sandpoint, not toward the west, and the Aleutian chain as that frontal boundary is coming over. And some pockets of rain and snow mainly in the Gulf. Most of that mixing in together there, so it doesn't look like it's going to be any substantial cold surge or wet surge there as a frontal boundary is draped right across the Copper River Basin and the eastern Alaska Range and north and east of the Wrangell-St. Elias region. Getting into Wednesday, another wave of low pressure is trying to set up here in the wake of the wave that crossed over the Aleutians and into the western Gulf. So this is a relatively slow-moving storm, but it could tap into some moisture across the eastern Gulf, and with that rain and some pockets of rain and snow a little bit further northward towards Sitka and the interior, maybe up around Angoon. Snow showers across British Columbia. Out to the west, dry weather for south central and southwestern Alaska. Another dying front running into the control of high pressure here. You can see some rain possibly across the Alaska Peninsula into the St. Paul and St. George areas. Low pressure then centered up around Adak and just south at 983 millibars. The colder side of that could produce some rain and snow showers out around Attu, but high pressure is keeping things pretty clear for the Yukon Valley all the way from tip to tail, it looks like, until you get into about Eagle, and 1,020 millibar high right over Barrow. Well, that'll weaken somewhat as we get into Thursday. Frontal boundary still sitting across some of the higher terrain of North America with rain showers across the southern parts of southeast. Another surge of occluded air on the frontal boundary working its way up from the eastern chain into Kodiak Island. The triple point still well south. This would be the greatest area of lift most likely, but pockets of rain and snow showers are possible, and this will include Kodiak Island now by Thursday. Still looking at dry weather for south central, most of the interior, but a few more clouds now north of the Yukon Valley, and low pressure coming in behind the first wave, also at 981 millibars. A few areas of rain and snow showers should be expected for the Aleutians, probably nothing out of the ordinary after what you've seen for most of the week. Temperature-wise today, low to mid-40s for southeast. Just a gorgeous day all the way into Prince William Sound. 42 in Homer, about the same there in Seward today. Upper 30s from Anchorage southward toward Kenai. Into the interior, mid-30s. Glen Allen, 33 degrees, 34 around Healy, 36 in Healy, 34 in Greeley, and 30 up around Eagle today. 21 at Fort Yukon. Farther north still teens and 20s north of the Yukon Valley. Ambler and Bettles both in the mid to upper 20s. The Arctic coast from 5 above to 5 below. 5 above in Barrow, 7 above in Kaktovik, and 3 around Point Lay. Around Kotzebue Sound, single digits and teens today. Kotzebue is looking at 14. Shishmaref closer to 10. Tin City about 8 degrees. A few snow showers out there today. 29 in Nome. St. Lawrence Island low 20s. McGrath was at 26. Tanana upper 20s today. 32 in Bethel. 28 around Nunivak Island. And Monica about 30 degrees. Bristol Bay temps in the mid 30s to low 40s. Kodiak Island in the upper 30s with Sandpoint about 37. Falls Pass closer to the lower 40s today. The Pribilofs hovering just shy of 40 degrees. St. George a little bit colder at 36. Unalaska 41, and the central and western chain just shy of the 40-degree mark as well. Overnight low temperatures in the 20s and 30s for most of southeast. Most areas, especially close to the coast, will remain in the mid-30s. Prince William Sound and south central in the low to mid-20s. Kodiak Island 33. Bristol Bay in the 20s. The Alaska Peninsula generally in the 30s tonight. 32 in St. Paul. Mid to upper 30s for the central and western chain. Nome at 13. Fairbanks in the single digits, as is most of the interior. McGrath, you're looking at 10 degrees. The Arctic coast and most of the Brooks Range anywhere from 5 to about 15 below. High temperatures tomorrow from 5 to about 10 above in the Arctic coast. The interior should go above freezing, including Fairbanks, Northway, Eagle, into Healy and Greeley. 41 in Talkeetna tomorrow, 40 in McGrath. Southwestern areas in the upper 20s and lower 30s. Some of the coldest spots will be Nunivak Island and Bethel. Elsewhere into Bristol Bay, temperatures could soar around King Salmon. 45 is possible. 42 in Kodiak. Low to mid 40s for the chain and the Alaska Peninsula. Nome looking at 30. Barrow 6 below those, so you'll keep your cold, with temperatures in southeast in the upper 30s to mid 40s. A gorgeous day for just about everywhere south of the Yukon and even northward in some cases. Flying weather tomorrow. IFR conditions will develop across some parts of coastal southeast and up the Clarence and Chatham Strait. And once you get into the central and western part of the chain, you'll run into IFR conditions again. Look for MVFR across a large part of the Bering and hit and miss across the Gulf and the southern coastline of Kodiak. Let's check those past conditions, though. Still looks like VFR conditions for most of the north. And as we go around the western sections of the Brooks, or of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect it to be VFR. Visual flight rule continues for Rainy Pass and around the Horn toward Windy Pass. Isabel Pass expected to be VFR, Tonita Pass and Porter's Pass all looking clear at this point, and Chilcoot and White Pass we expect to be VFR. No big change in your freezing levels. You'll notice some of that elevated warmth trying to work its way northward ahead of several of those low pressure waves. We've got 2,000 to 4,000 foot freezing lines there across the eastern Gulf. Most of this pattern seems to be pretty flat, and the surface freezing line static there just north of the Pribilofs out across the Bering Sea. Icing potential shows some light to isolated moderate, mainly below 10,000 but above 5,000 feet around the Dixon entrance and also across the central and western part of the chain. That's a little bit higher up around 12,000 feet to above 5,000 feet there. Otherwise hit and miss across the Gulf, mainly along those waves of low pressure as they're traveling in from the west and southwest. The jet stream shows our ridge of high pressure still kind of snaking around a little bit. It's around the Bering Strait right now, and that's keeping some of that coldest, driest air from making its way into most of Alaska. With southeast Alaska kind of in more active pattern here, that may allow a little bit of that wetter weather in from the south. But the main jet stream right now and the main storm track is still coming in from eastern Asia and running right across the North Pacific and bypassing most of Alaska. At 9,000 feet, we have a weak area of low pressure across the northern Gulf. That's driving in more of a southerly flow into southeast, and that brings in those winds around 20 knots or so. More of a northwesterly flow coming in off the Chukchi Sea at 10 knots all the way into the interior, and low pressure out across Kiska right now, 20 to 25 knots with more of a southerly flow coming in across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain. That's making its way into the YK Delta as well, 15 to about 25 knots there from the south and southwest. A similar pattern, a little bit more of a high pressure influence across the interior at 3,000 feet. Low pressure just west of Sitka, also aiding that southerly flow, adding a little more moisture to the weather pattern here. You'll find some faster moving winds south of the central chain there, Adak and Atka, looking at winds around 40 knots or so. More of a northwesterly flow coming in south of Attu and Shemya. That's around 50 knots, so your greatest winds are still out to the west. Otherwise, light winds and somewhat variable across the interior, the west coast, the Arctic coast, and the southern Gulf, or the northern Gulf, I should say, and the southern parts of Alaska. So all in all, not too bad if you're flying any of the major passes or traffic ways there in smaller craft. Tomorrow's turbulence, then, we should expect some light chop across southern parts of southeast, mainly below 6,000 feet, around any of our islands there across the west coast and the Bering, below 3,000 feet, including areas around the Bering Strait and the chain. You're looking at some light to isolated moderate as those waves of low pressure are traversing your area. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with a look at your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Jim Peranto. What if a tsunami was generated by an earthquake in your area and you needed to take immediate action? Would you know what to do? Would you know where to go? Just how prepared are you for a tsunami? Well, today I have John Madden in studio, and he is the Director of the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the state of Alaska. And he's going to tell us today about how his division prepares for and responds to tsunami events. Hi, John.
Hello, Jim. Thank you for the invitation here.
I appreciate you coming in today. A lot of information to get to, but before we go into the specifics about tsunamis, just tell us a little bit about your division.
Within Alaska, the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, in essence, is responsible for the safety and security of the people and economy of Alaska. We face a huge range of risk threats and hazards. Some of them are seasonal, like fires and floods. Some of them could happen at any time, like earthquakes and tsunamis. When that event happens, we do respond and we do recover. But most of our time is in preparing the community and the individuals on how to take care of themselves in those opening hours. What skills do they need? What supplies do they need? What organization do they need? What communications? So preparedness is our major tool for helping communities deal with these types of disasters.
Now, as far as tsunamis are concerned, what threats do tsunamis pose to Alaska?
Alaska, more than any other place in the world, has more coastline subject to the threat of tsunami. It can go all the way out to the Aleutians, through south central, southeast, from coast to coast, 2,000 miles of it. And I think there are more than 60 communities that could be hit by a tsunami for an offshore earthquake. No other nation, no other state comes close. But the 5 Pacific states, the west coast of the 48 states, Hawaii and Alaska, are the core purpose for why we band together for tsunami preparedness.
And the Tsunami Awareness Week is every year, end of March, and I believe it's done that way to coincide with the anniversary of the '64 quake, right? What's the goal of the Tsunami Awareness Week?
Tsunami Awareness Week is coincidental with the anniversary of the Good Friday earthquake. We hope people don't assume that our earthquakes are seasonal and only happen in the spring. It could happen at any time. But it's a reminder that this state has been hit and hit hard by devastating and deadly tsunamis. This education opportunity helps people understand the early warnings so they can take immediate action by themselves and supported by the tsunami alert or emergency alert system.
Okay. And where can communities or individuals go to get help preparing for a tsunami?
We have national websites that are supported through the National Weather Service. That is www.tsunami.gov, tsunami.gov. And within Alaska, we have links to that at www.ready.alaska.gov.
Okay.
All of our division's preparedness programs are listed in that one place. So we'll have fire, flood, earthquake, tsunami, and the other threats.
Okay. And the tsunami warning system, tell us a little bit about that. How does that work?
This is one of the best partnerships between federal, state, and local that you can point to. The national government has sensors to detect an earthquake. They have the computer systems to analyze if that earthquake is likely to generate a tsunami. Then they work with the state and the local to get that word out. That's the tsunami warning system. But part of this preparedness and education program is to make sure that people can make their own decisions early on. I have a smoke detector in my house. If it goes off, I act immediately to get my family out of harm's way. But if I were to smell smoke or see fire in my house, I would not wait for the smoke detector to go off before I act.
Right.
Part of what we want to make sure people understand that if you're in a tsunami vulnerable area on the coast, you feel hard shaking from an earthquake, don't wait for the alert, don't wait for the siren, or don't wait for the sound over the radio. Move you and your family to high ground.
Yeah, and I remember just working in Kodiak and being at the Weather Service office down there, and the balloon launch was right next to the water down there. And I remember seeing, signs posted that, hey, if you feel an earthquake, don't wait for, a warning to be issued. Get to higher ground. So the other thing I wanted to ask you is, hypothetically, if a tsunami damages a community, what or how will you respond to that?
The priority of the state in any disaster is to quickly determine the needs of the local community. Are there safety of life issues? Are there people who are injured? Are there people who are, have had their homes damaged? Are they without shelter? And to address those immediate safety of life issues first. And we have the full resources of the state, the National Guard, the troopers, every asset in order to get to that. Should we need more, we have the partnerships with the federal agencies within the state that can supplement us should the need arise. But that first opening hour, the first day, the first several days, is all on safety of life regardless of the expense. Then we'll transition into the recovery, so we look at how best to rebuild, how best to restore a community, its population, and the economy.
Okay. You have a couple signs here. What are these signs you have in front of you?
We have two signs. They're standardized across all of the tsunami areas around the country, that if a community has worked out all the plans, they've assessed where the tsunami risks are, the evacuation routes, they use this type of sign to indicate to the people who live there or the people who visit there. And this is the same type of sign in Alaska as what you'd see in Hawaii. And that's the short about for the route. And then part of an education one says, if you feel it's shaking, don't wait. take immediate action, seek the high ground. These two signs together, one is to give instructions about what to do and instructions about where to go. There's very complementary and standardized, and there's put up after significant analysis of where the water is likely to go, where the high ground, where you can reach very quickly, because tsunamis don't give much warning.
Yeah, yes, and well, we were all privy to that during the Asian earthquake, which I think was a couple of years ago. Thank you, John, for coming in today. I really appreciate it. You have a lot of responsibility, and I envy you very much for being able to work in that division and the way you do, and to be able to sort of coordinate all that, because it's a lot of stuff to deal with.
Alaska faces the widest range of risks, threats, and hazards than any other state in the Union. And it just means that we are all, and each of us, responsible for ourselves, our families, and our communities to be prepared, be able to handle it for yourself for a while until these larger systems can come to play. It is a challenge, but I'd rather do it here than any place in the country.
Thank you again for coming in, John. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Jim.
And there's a couple of websites. I think John mentioned a couple of them, but let's just repeat a few of them here just in case. We have www.ak-prepared.com. That will get you to John's division, their website, and also www.tsunami.gov. I think John mentioned that one. And then www.noaa.gov, which is also another website that you can go and get tsunami information. Thank you for joining us here on Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
And the gods of coincidence are smiling on the show today because we didn't put it there on purpose. It just happened to show up that way. So all those websites, great ways to get informed about what you need to do in case there is a tsunami around Alaska. And at the top of the show, we were telling you that a magnitude 8.2 earthquake off the coast of Chile has occurred. Not an April Fool's joke. It's the real deal. And at this point, there is no watch or advisory for any tsunami in Alaska at this time. But you should continue to monitor your NOAA weather radio. The website weather.gov/Alaska, or whatever your favorite means of emergency communication is, just in case. It would be many hours from, well, about an hour or so ago is when the earthquake occurred, around 4 o'clock, I believe. So again, about 16 to 18 hour travel time. But at this point, there is no advisory or watch for any danger in Alaska at this point. Let's check in with your marine weather forecast now. On Wednesday, a northerly flow coming down the Lynn Canal, still light with 3-foot seas, 4-foot seas as you head further south with more of a 20-knot wind. Wind coming up the coast just west of Craig, more of a southeasterly flow at 20 knots with a 5-foot sea. Otherwise, offshore winds from 10 to 20 knots with seas ranging from 5 to 6 feet. By Thursday, a shift there with the trough of low pressure coming in. That's going to allow some of that wetter weather to move in to Sitka, Petersburg, Craig, down toward Ketchikan and Annette. And look for more of a northeasterly flow across Stevens Passage there around Frederick Sound, more of a northerly flow across the Lynn Canal and northwesterlies in the northern entrances and outside Icy Cape and Cape Fairweather. That's around 15 knots. Around South Central, a light and variable flow in most cases up and down the Cook Inlet and around Prince William Sound, 10-knot winds if that. Easterly flow west of the Barren Islands, northeasterlies east of the Barren Islands, both at 15 knots, and around Kodiak Island, also looking at 15-knot winds. 4-foot seas in Chillicothe Strait, 8-foot seas as you get out into the western parts of the Gulf near Kodiak Island. That becomes an easterly flow at 20 knots with northeasterlies strengthening in Chillicothe Strait as we head into Thursday. Still looking at variable winds around Prince William Sound, the northern and western Gulf outside of Seward, and across the northern parts of the Cook Inlet where the sea ice is diminishing rapidly. 1-foot seas are expected there on Thursday. Across the Alaska Peninsula, 15 to 20-knot winds there from the east and southeast. Inside Bristol Bay, only a 3-foot sea there. 12-foot seas south of King Cove and Sand Point with a 15-knot wind. That is increasing as we head into Thursday. 20-knot winds with a 9-foot sea, 25-knot winds there from the south and east of Chignik and south of Castle Cape with a 9-foot sea, and 9-foot seas expected inside Bristol Bay with a 30-knot wind from the east. Wind from the south and southeast will continue around the Aleutians as we head into Wednesday. 15 to 25-knot winds for most of the central and eastern chain. 20 to 25-knot winds from Kiska out toward Attu at 13 to 14-foot seas. Notice a little bit of a change there across the west as we get into Thursday. A northerly wind develops all the way out toward Kiska, a 25 to 30-knot flow. Westerlies kick in behind the front. 15 to 20 knot winds are expected there, and we're still holding on to 15 to 20 knot winds, maybe 25 knot winds south of Unalaska and Nikolsky as that sweeping change rolls its way up into the southern Bering Sea with the next wave of low pressure. Again, doesn't look terribly strong, but it will shift the winds around just a little bit with northerlies behind it. A north and easterly flow coming out of Norton Sound, 20 to 25 knots there. 5-foot seas across the St. Matthew Island waters with a 30 knot wind, and easterlies outside of Kuskokwim Bay out across the Pribilofs as well. 6 to 9-foot seas in the southern Bering, and that diminishes somewhat as we head into Thursday. Still looking at 20 to 30 knot winds from the east and a 25 knot flow across the St. Matthew Island waters there with a 5-foot sea. Light and variable winds there across the Arctic coast for Wednesday. Northeasterlies a little bit stronger around Cape Lisburn down into Kotzebue Sound at 15 knots. You'll look for a little bit of an increase in the wind there around Kaktovik from the south and east at 15 knots. Otherwise, northerlies coming down the Chukchi Sea coast at about 10 to 15 knots as we head into Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather. Weather is pretty quiet across most parts of Alaska tonight. Again, no watch or advisory at this time from the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska from the magnitude 8.2 earthquake off the coast of Chile in South America. A frontal boundary working across the Aleutians at 984 millibars will scatter rain and snow showers as we head into tonight. A little bit of wind from time to time, but nothing too substantial. Small craft advisories at worst. Light rainfall across the southern Bering and toward Kodiak Island might change into a little bit of snow. A mix of rain and snow for some parts of southeastern Alaska. You'll have a better chance of rainfall as we head into the next couple days. That's a look at your Alaska weather. As we stand here in black, it's a beautiful thing. Thank you for watching, and as always, your very latest weather information is always on weather.gov/Alaska. See if I can get that right. And of course, your NOAA Weather Radio is the best place to get any watches and warnings as they occur. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.